This is the Ramana Maharshi 40 Verses on Reality Satsang, a time for self-reflection and self-inquiry. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. This is Richard Clarke hosting this satsang. Welcome. I'm a seeker like you, sharing what we love. I've been blessed with years of deep teaching, and I bring this to you with this satsang. This week's reading from 40 Verses on Reality is verse 4. These are Ramana's words. If one has form oneself, the world and God also will appear to have form. But if one is formless, who is it that sees these forms, and how? Without the eye, can any object be seen? The seeing eye is the eye, and that eye is the eye of infinity. How you see yourself determines how you see anything else. If you have a form, then so does everything else. If you see yourself as an individual, then the world is populated with other individuals. If you, though, are formless, so are the world and God, called the vast absolute. Vast, since it has no limit, and absolute, since there is no other. Only one, without form, without any other, one without a second. How do you see anything, and how do you know the seeing? The physical eye sees an object, that is, light striking the retina signals the optic nerve, which in turn lights up a part of the brain where a mental representation of the object is then created to see the object in our mind. Who or what knows the mind? Who really sees? Does the mind know itself? Or do you know the mind? Non-duality teaches that the knower can never be found in the known. You can verify this for yourself through spiritual practice. So who is this knower? When you look for the knower, you may get to a quiet blankness. Who knows this blankness? It is the self, Satchitananda in Sanskrit, or being, consciousness, bliss. The self, yourself, the same self that is all. There is only one self, and that is who you are. To practice about this, inquire into yourself. Who knows? Use this inquiry to dive into your own consciousness. If you think it is the mind that knows, then ask, Who knows this mind? Does this knower have a form? Now, on to the videos for the week. First, Swami Sarvapriyananda talks about your real self is one step back from the feeling I am.
The ego and the reflected consciousness, because they are identified, they become virtually identical. The ego becomes conscious. In Vedanta, we say the witness consciousness is reflected in the subtle body. The witness consciousness is reflected in the subtle body. Let's try to understand this. When I say the ultimate seer is consciousness, immediately what we think is, yeah, I get it. I am conscious right now. I am aware. I am sentient. We all are. Right now we feel consciousness within ourselves. So is that the witness self? Is that Atman? Is that Brahman? Is that the ultimate reality which Vedanta speaks about? That consciousness which we all feel right now, that we are conscious beings? Vedanta says, actually not so. The consciousness that we feel right now, this awareness in the mind which we feel now, is a reflection of the witness consciousness, is a reflection of the real, the pure consciousness. The pure consciousness, we don't have a notion about it now. What we have right now is this reflected consciousness. The word used in Sanskrit is chit chaya. Literally, it means the shadow or reflection of consciousness. Chit, consciousness, chaya, reflection or shadow. It's a bit like this. At night, we don't see the sun. We don't see sunlight, but in one sense we do, because it's the sunlight reflected from the moon which illumines the world. When you see the world shining in moonlight, basically what's happening is that the sun shines on the moon and the moon reflects that sunlight to earth, and with that reflected light we see the world at night. This is exactly what is happening. Pure consciousness, we don't seem to understand what is meant by that. We understand what the world is. We understand what the body is. We understand what the mind is. We even understand what is meant by consciousness in the mind. So far, so good. But what is this pure consciousness they're talking about? Just like the sun at night, it's not visible, but its effects are visible. Because of that consciousness, because of that pure consciousness, the Atman, our minds are lit up. If we look inside, we feel, we are aware, we are thinking, we are feeling, we are trying to understand. We see, we hear. Our minds are lit up. Just like the moon is lit up, not by its own light. We say moonlight, but its moon doesn't have even a little bit of light. It's by the light of the unseen sun at night that the moon is lit up. And by that moonlight, we experience the world. In the same way, it is by the light of the Atman, of pure consciousness, the witness. I use these words synonymously. The witness, Sakshi, Atman, self, Brahman. Now, exactly like that, the mind has the capacity, being very fine, mind has the capacity to reflect consciousness and then use that consciousness for what? For exactly this, for seeing, for hearing, for smelling, tasting, touching, for thinking, for all our conscious experiences. Right now, we are sitting and listening. If I ask you, are you aware? You ask yourself, am I aware? And the answer will come from inside. Yes, I'm aware. It could be I'm aware of the Swami speaking, if you're paying attention. It could be I'm aware of how long is this going to last, if you're not paying so much attention. It could be that I'm aware of my dream, if you're completely out of it and sleeping. If you're dropping off to sleep, you are in your dream world, but you are aware. That awareness is what is called reflected consciousness or reflected awareness. It's like it's not the real awareness. It's not the real you. The reflected consciousness all the time. In the mind, the reflected consciousness is there. The reflected consciousness and the I, they become one. How do they become one? Just like when I look in a mirror, there's a reflected face in the mirror. When I look in a mirror, there's a reflected face in the mirror, and the reflected face and the mirror are one. They become identified. You cannot separate them. Whenever there is a mirror, there will be a reflection. So the reflection and the mirror are one. The reflection here is the reflected consciousness. Your face is the original consciousness, the witness consciousness, and the mirror is the I sense. Mirror is the I sense, ahankara. The ahankara, the I sense, ego, and the reflected consciousness are one, like the reflection and a mirror. They become one. Because of the identification with the ego. Identification of ego and what? Don't get confused. Ego and the reflected consciousness. The ego and the reflected consciousness, because they are identified, they become virtually identical. The ego becomes conscious. Just look inward. Let's look inside and we feel I. And it feels like the most conscious thing we have. The most conscious thing we have, we experience, is my I-ness. When you think right now, I, don't you feel I am aware? All the time you feel. The moment you think I, it's an aware I. It's a conscious I. This reflected consciousness identified with the ego. What we think we are, we don't think we are the witness consciousness. We think we are the ego. This ego shining in the light of reflected consciousness, this is the villain. We think we are that. Here I am, I use the word I for myself. So these are the three things with which I am identified. The ego, the I, is identified with the body, with the reflected consciousness in the mind, and with the pure consciousness, witness consciousness, the sakshi. Now comes the crucial question, the real crucial question. What is my relationship, the I feeling, bear down here, concentrate here. The I feeling which we have right now, what is its relationship to the witness consciousness? That is the question. What is its relationship to Brahman, to Atman, to existence, consciousness, bliss? All the same thing. Witness consciousness, Brahman, Atman, Satchidananda, all the same thing. What is the relationship of Brahman, Satchidananda, Atma, Sakshi, witness consciousness, pure consciousness, whatever you call it, with the I feeling which I've got right now? And the answer is no relationship. There is no relationship. Bhranti janyam, it is born of error. We, the pure consciousness, we feel I in this body, it's born of error. I am really not I. Yes. You see, we chant it lovingly. Mano buddhya hankara chittani naham. Do you know what it translates into? I am not the mind, manas, buddhi. I am not the intellect, chitta. I am not the memory, ahankara. Mano buddhya hankara chittani naham. Ahankara. Ego. It literally translates as I am not the ego or I am not the I. The witness consciousness which you or I really are, we are the witness of the I. The moment you think I, it's an aware I. It's a conscious I. The most conscious thing we have, we experience, is my I-ness. The ego and the reflected consciousness, because they are identified, they become virtually identical. The ego becomes conscious. The mirror is the mind, and the face you see in the mirror is the consciousness already involved in the mind. But the original face, which is being reflected, that's original consciousness. Because if we get a sense of that, we'll see how tremendously distinct it is from everything else. It is not an object. The awareness which we feel right now, which you call Chetana, that awareness which we feel right now, that's also an object. Because you feel it. But what feels that awareness? The witness consciousness which you or I really are, we are the witness of the I. You have to take one step back from the I, the ego, take a step back from the I to merge into your real existence consciousness bliss.
And next is Rupert Spira answering a question: is awareness ever absent?
Hello, my name is Peter.
Hi, Peter.
Please say something about the difference between awareness of absence and absence of awareness, if there is any difference.
Awareness of absence is awareness prior to the arising of experience. And absence of awareness is an idea that does not relate to an experience.
Thank you. Or is there more to say?
That was easier than I was expecting. If you've understood what I said, then it's not necessary to say any more about it.
I think I was too fast saying thank you.
I
thought I understood, but I'm not so sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the difference in your experience between emptying this space of all its contents and removing the space itself?
The latter, it doesn't make sense.
That is what the absence of awareness is. The awareness of absence would be like removing the content of awareness, like removing the content of this room, leaving only the empty space of this room. The awareness of absence would be the absence of the objects of experience, leaving only awareness. But as you rightly say, you can remove the objects of this room from this room, leaving only empty space, but you cannot remove the empty space. In other words, there is the relatively speaking, we can talk about the absence of objects, but we cannot talk about meaningfully about the absence of space. You can talk about the absence of thoughts. When you remove your thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions from awareness, only awareness remains. That's deep sleep, awareness of absence. But you cannot remove awareness. Where would you put it?
During, sorry,
No, keep going. Keep going.
during deep sleep, in your analogy, I understand it that there's no content of awareness. There's just
Yes.
awareness.
Yes.
Is it possible during deep sleep to that awareness is just aware of its own and nothing else?
It's not only possible, that is the case. That is exactly what deep sleep is, awareness simply being aware of itself.
Would you be able to remember after?
No, because there's nothing there it's only possible to remember an object. So there's nothing there. The waking state mind, when it looks back, it can only look back at something that was objective. You can remember what you had for breakfast this morning, because it has an objective content to it.
May I continue a little bit?
Yes.
Many years ago, once I realized upon waking up that that sleep had been completely different. There was this strange. I once heard the words "the luminosity of deep sleep," and it made sense. I'm not natural English speaking. It made sense. Sorry, to my experience, because it was so different. There was. Then I had the thoughts. Well, I had this realization of how deep sleep was. And then I started to think, well, and I thought it lasted the whole night at first, but then I thought about it and I said, well, I wouldn't know because there was no activity. So
Exactly.
it could have been just a glimpse.
Yeah.
And then upon further thinking, I realized maybe it was just a dream. I wouldn't know.
No. When you say, you see, when the waking state mind reappears, it construes the third white segment of the circle. It construes it as a state in time. And that's why the waking state mind says deep sleep lasted for 4 hours. It's why you began your question during deep sleep. But during deep sleep, there is no during. Deep sleep only seems to last in time from the perspective of the waking state. But when you sleep deeply, don't you always feel that the moment you fall asleep is the moment you wake up? You
Yes.
never have an experience. You experience deep sleep, but there is no time or duration in that experience. It's because there is literally no time. Because why? Because time, even when time seems to exist, it doesn't really exist. Time is the apparent space, the distance between events. But when there are no events present, then what seemed to be time collapses into dimensionless consciousness. In fact, that's all it was to begin with. It was thinking that refracted dimensionless consciousness and made it appear as one dimension of time. So even during the waking state, there is no real time, and it's easy to check this in your experience. It is always only now. Have you ever had an experience that was not now?
No.
How many nows have you experienced in your life?
Just this one.
Just this one. And is this now moving along a line of time, or is it static?
No, it's the same.
It's the same. It's still. No one. Not only do we not experience time in deep sleep, we don't experience time in the waking state. There is no time to experience. It is eternally now. The now is not going anywhere. It hasn't come from somewhere. But this dimensionless moment, or not even a moment, this dimensionless presence called now, when filtered through the finite mind, appears as time.
So could I say that if you stay with the now, there's only now, and it's only when I start thinking that time and space appears.
When time and space
Seem to appear.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. 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 Just try it now. In the absence of thought, don't think of anything. You don't think of anything. You have no experience of the past. Or let me ask you, let's do it another way around. Try now to actually enter the past, actually go there. Step out of the now and actually visit the place that you conceive as the past. Can you actually go there?
No.
Have you ever been there?
No.
Has anybody ever been there?
No.
Could anyone ever be there? Nobody has ever had a glimpse of the past. And do the same with the future now. Can you go there?
No.
You can imagine it, but that imagination takes place now. But can we go to the place we imagine? Can we verify its existence? No.
No.
And nobody has ever been or experienced the place we call the vast expanse of space we call the past, and the vast expanse of space we call the future. No one has ever for a moment glimpsed it. All that is ever known is now. The only now there is, not numerous nows all lined up in this space. There is no space, there is no time during which a series of nows could exist. There is just this now, the only now there is. It doesn't come from a past because there is no past for it to come to. It's not evolving slowly towards a future because there is nothing for it to evolve into. The now is not a moment. It only seems to be a moment from the perspective of thought, which thinks there is a line of time. From the perspective of the thought that believes there is a line of time, the now is a moment on that line. But that's only from the perspective of thought that believes in the existence of time. If we stay close to our experience, there is no time. So the now is not a moment. There's no such thing as the present moment. That's just New Age thinking. There's no such thing as the present moment. There is the present. It is eternity. It is not in time. The now is not in time because there is no time for it to be in. It is eternity. It has nothing to do with time. There is no time. And eternity now is consciousness. And exactly the same is true. I won't elaborate it. It's your homework for those of you that are interested. Exactly the same is true of the place we call here. Have any of you ever, I'm just going to begin, don't worry, I won't fill out all the dots. So have any of you ever been to the place you call over there? Have any of you left the place you call here and actually visited the place you call there? Has anyone ever been there? Has anyone ever left here? Just stepped a centimeter away from here. So here is not a place in space, because there is no space present for here to be a place in. Just as now is not a moment in time, because there is no time present for now to be a moment in. Just as now is eternity, here is infinity. Not infinity, a vast, endless expanse of space, but infinity, not finite, no dimensions, dimensionless. The placeless place at which experience, not some extraordinary enlightened experience, but this experience, the place where this experience is happening, it is happening in eternity. It is happening in the infinite here, dimensionless consciousness. It is only thought and perception that refracts this dimensionless consciousness into time and space. And that is why everybody's experience, without exception, takes place at the moment we call now and at the place we call here. It's the only time that is ever experienced is now, and the only place that is ever experienced is the place we call here. There is no time present for now to be a moment in, and there is no space present for now to be a place in. the here and now, our dimensionless consciousness.
And now we will listen to my teacher, Nome, in a Satsang discourse where he asks the questions, what is it that you truly are?
The Maharshi has said that to say I have realized or I know the self and I have not realized or I don't know the self are both matters for laughter. They are absurd statements. The self is not something objective to be known or unknown. Your being cannot become an object, conceived or perceived. And if a searching inquiry be made as to who is it that knows, who is it that does not know, there is found to be no one answering to the name of I. Inquire within yourself, taking your own sense of immutable existence as the basis of the inquiry. Trace out your own existence and know what is there. It is not the body. It is not any of the thoughts constituting the mind. What is it that is assumed to be an I, but which is actually existing all the time? What is it that it is assumed to become embodied, to have birth and death, but which is itself actually unborn, imperishable, and formless and unembodied? What is it that seems to be at the center of all thoughts, yet itself actually is never conceived, the unknown knower of all that is known, as the Upanishad says? What is it that you truly are? If just this much is realized, Brahman knows Brahman. Reality comprehends itself. With a knowledge that is eternal. Not a knowledge divided into knower, knowing, and known, but non-dual knowledge, in which being and knowledge are identical. Being is not an object, and it is not an activity. Likewise, knowledge is not something gained or lost. In the inquiry to know yourself, the dissolution of the inquirer, or the penetration into the nature of the inquirer, is what is essential. The dissolution of his individuality, what seems to mark him off as a separate being, the abandonment of such false definition, is the progress so-called. Actually, one is traveling no distance whatsoever. It is more like dreaming you were one thing and waking up to find that you were not that thing at all, that you were dreaming. If this happens, is there any transformation? Yet the old delusion is gone. Misidentification constituted the delusion. And delusion alone was the cause of any of the bondage or suffering experienced in that dream. To be free of suffering, to liberate yourself from the imagined bondage, be rid of delusion. Delusion is just confusion regarding your own nature, taking yourself to be something that you are not. Inquiry resolves the delusion and reveals a knowledge that is innate. In the earnest attempt to realize this knowledge, approached by dissolution of what you assume yourself to be. If all that is falsely supposed is abandoned, then without anything more whatsoever, the remainder is the truth itself, the Supreme Self itself, happy and at peace in its own nature always. Suppose yourself to be the ego, and the self will seem to be elusive. Inquire and find the non-existence of that I, and you yourself are what you have found. Falsely assume yourself to be the body, and realization will seem exceedingly difficult. God or the Absolute will seem to be something other. Abandon the misidentification with the body. Then where are you? Where is God? If identified with the body, you will look for the self as something sensed, or as a sensing entity. Be free of such confusion. If identified with the mind, you will look for the self or realization, or reality, in the form of some mental mode or mental state. Your real nature, what is to be realized, is free of any mental mode, free of any mental state, whether it be waking, dreaming, deep dream or sleep, or any mode occurring within those states. You are not a state of mind. The realization is likewise. You are not a condition of the body. The realization is likewise. Free of the body, free of the mind. Non-objective, unchanging. This space-like, very real remainder, which alone has been existing always, is the truth of your being. Know it experientially, firsthand for yourself. It is natural by the dissolution of the one who supposedly does not know.
All right. And now we will take a little time to meditate, to inquire, and notice that you exist. And investigate just what that means. You exist, and you know that you exist. Who knows? Does the mind know? Who knows the mind? Who am I? All right, let's end with a short chant. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Now, thank you for joining me today. If you have enjoyed this material and want to know more, you can look at my free book site, my blog, or the YouTube channel. The URLs will be on screen next. Thanks again for joining me.